We are returning from executive session. If you will please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let me see if I can bring this closer. Go into the chair's report. We have two memorandums of agreement that we discussed in executive session and voted on. So we will briefly discuss those and then give the same vote that we presented in the executive session. The first memorandum is with the Custodial Association. Ms. Lathrop, do you want to discuss that?
Sure. In our custodial association, we have custodians who also are our maintenance. They are hired as our maintenance workers for electrical and plumbing. And there was a typo in the original contract. They get a differential pay increase over regular custodial pay. The typo was 15%. It was supposed to be a range of 20 to 30% depending on licensure and experience. And the memorandum strikes the typo and puts in the correct amount.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to accept the memorandum of agreement between the North Andover Custodial Association and the school committee.
And I'll second it.
Any discussion? All right, again, your same vote that you voted for in executive session. Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. Moskovich was not
Yes.
yet in attendance. Oh, you were there. Okay. Okay.
I was there, yes.
For this one, yes.
Oh, for this, okay. Oh, yes, for this one, I apologize. Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Cormier?
Yes.
And I vote yes, voted yes. Thank you. And then we had a second one with the North Andover Educational Administrative Assistance Association. Ms. Lathrop, will you explain that MOA?
Again, during negotiations, there were about the amount of time that the administrative assistants were working. Previously, they had worked a 7.5-hour day with an unpaid lunch. Now they're working a 7.5-hour day with a paid lunch. And the original contract was written with 7 hours, which was a misrepresented what we had talked about in bargaining, but we made an agreement to add an additional 15-minute break to the administrative assistant contract.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to accept the memorandum of agreement between the North Andover Educational Administrative Assistance Association and the school committee.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
This one, Mr. Moskovich.
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Cormier?
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right, those are approved. Moving on, we are going into public comment. We've allotted 30 minutes for this public comment. Just as a reminder, this is not a question and answer session. This is an opportunity for comment only. We're limiting you to 3 minutes. As always, Mr. Hicks will be our timekeeper, and we'll notify you when that time is up. And remember to please direct all comments to the chair. So it is open.
Good evening. Erin Harris, 135 Stevens Street. Thank you for affording us the opportunity to come before you again to comment about the status of the school budget. As Benjamin Franklin once said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. That's as true now as it ever was. This is about finances, and it is about the financial well-being of our town today and tomorrow and 10 years from now. Investing in our schools is an investment in our town. A school district that merely survives will not bring new taxpayers to this town. It will not increase our property values. It will not bring businesses to the area. But a thriving school district will. It may hurt in the interim to increase our budget to maintain a level service, but we need to feel that pain for us to thrive and not just survive. We can and should do this, not just for our students, but for the town as a whole. We have the ability to change how we do things. It's true that in the past, we have not allocated adequately to our schools. Our schools are not overspending. They're underfunded. And it is your job as the school committee to advocate not for what we can get or what we think politically might be popular to get from the town, but for what we need. And what we need not to survive, but what we need to thrive. And we need a level services budget for our school to thrive. When we underfund our schools chronically, you start to see the cracks in the foundation. And we see them now. We see them in that 200% increase in the line item for out-of-district placements. We are not serving the needs of our children who are most at risk. And we are paying out the nose for it to send them out of district. Invest now. Do better now, here in our district, with our teachers, with our administrators who are committed to this community. Bring those students back in. We may spend more now, but it will pay dividends in the end when we are not having increasing out-of-district placements. Think strategically. Think long-term. Think financially, not just these budgets for this year. How do we generate more revenue? We generate that by making better schools. We make people want to come here. Young families who are still working, who are still growing, who can start businesses here in this town. It won't be easy, but we can and we should do it. I know you've all expressed your opinions that level services is not viable or feasible. But it's not about that. It's about what we need. Advocate for what we need, because if you don't, the school committee who's charged with that responsibility, you can't expect the town members to do the right thing. I know you can and will do what is best for our students.
Hello, my name is Shannon Gately. I'm at Phillips Court. I have attended every meeting in person or virtually and listened to everything. Only spoke a couple times because I was patiently trying to give you all enough time to do the research needed to find, allocate funds. But after last week's meeting, I'm done being patient. The school committee said, Pam, that you were a leader. Well, I believe in serving leadership, which is supporting from the ground level up, and it prioritizes serving others over personal goals or agendas. A leader would fight for our children and what is in their best interest, and not proposing cuts and closures. If you take into the considerations the cuts that you made last year and the cuts that you are proposing this year, we all know that the level service budget is still lower than what our kids deserve, but we need to start here and continue to work on increasing this number. At the first meeting, it was said that the middle school and high school libraries would be cut. Well, by the next meeting, Pam, you were able to find funds to
Please
save.
direct all comments to Chair, not to Ms. Lathrop, please.
Apology, I wasn't addressing it to her, just saying is in my statement that Pam found the funds to save the libraries, a library. Imagine what could be done if it was more time put into a thoughtful review for the next school year and the year after, so that our town could not only get back on track, but start thriving. The parents and the people of this town have been spending so much time researching, deep diving, and continuing to come up with comprehensive data and solutions on what we could be doing, presenting them to you, because that's what the hard work is. Making cuts is easy and convenient. We ask the same for you. Do the work. Support our children like you agreed to when you joined the school committee. How many times do parents need to read to you the school committee guidelines and what your job is, but you continuously, blatantly ignore it? You have all mentioned in the past that you want to pass the level service budget. Well, that's your job. Let the finance committee determine if it's feasible or not. But do it. I do grassroots advocacy in all states across the country for a living, which means I have the time, the energy, and effort that it takes to make things happen. I will use my boots on the ground and go door to door to every house in this town if I have to And if you don't believe me, try me. Because I can do this. I've done it in many states and I will do it here. I don't normally say this, but because I feel it's important, I'm a single mom. My son lost his father a few years ago when he was 5. And if it wasn't for the ABECC and Kittredge, he wouldn't be thriving like he is today. So if you think that I'm going to stand here idling and let you cause irrevocable damages to my child and all the children of this town, you have another thing coming. You've messed with my cub and all the cubs in this town, and watch out because this mama bear is fierce. If you can't do your job and do it properly by representing what's best for this children of this town and this community by passing the level service budget, then I would like to ask you, why are you even on this committee? I would like to leave you with this note. Please remember that you are all public servants and that you serve the people, and especially our children, not us to you. And if you're not going to listen, know that job security isn't a given. I will find people like us here who have done the hard work, who will advocate for our children and for our town. And don't think I can't get the signatures to get a recall ballot done. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. Andy Tarsi, 88 Johnson Street. I've worked as a nonprofit executive and in and out of the public domain in a variety of ways in my life, and have a sense of how hard it can be to be in public leadership, although I haven't ever done what you all have done by putting your names on the ballot and taking on this responsibility week after week. It's in fact the first time I've been to a school committee meeting, and if the tri-board meeting I guess would have been the first, this is the second. So I have a lot of respect for how much it takes to step up and how hard it is, and I can count. I get it that the money's not there. However, I feel like some of the previous speakers, both of the previous speakers, and I would associate myself with both of their very articulate comments, in that I have perhaps a different view than some of you do. I have a view that your job is to advocate for a vision of what our children urgently need to compete, and not to capitulate in advance, to accommodate in advance what is more likely to happen politically in your estimation. I just don't think that's your job, and I think too many members of the committee are wrestling with whether that is really what you're supposed to do, because you're trying to be responsible. I think it's to create a vision. I asked a question at the last meeting at the tri-board that was totally ignored, and that is, who do you benchmark against? Who do you see out there and say, that town has some of this figured out and we want to model on that financially and pedagogically and strategically and what have you? Who's doing it right? The narrative in the news is always comparing the US to China or India. Who does North Andover compare itself to, both in terms of how we fund our schools and what we want them learning? There's a new wing out the door and to the right that was supposed to have a robotics program, I'm told. I've only been here 4 years, but my son goes to this school now, and I coach a soccer team that is so much more diverse than people think this town is, and all those kids go here too. And apparently we're not having it because we don't have the money for it. We live literally in the world capital of robotics and semiconductor technology. You can't throw a tennis ball from this spot and not hit, well, you would take a good throw, but you know what I mean, half of that industry. Where's the vision for creating the partnerships to break the mold, to match with some place in Massachusetts or China that's doing whatever it is kids need? That's your job in my estimation. And I have not heard one time in this debate where we're supposed to go. I'm actually here to say I don't support the level services budget because it's inadequate, because it's the status quo. I do want to say in closing that I urge you to support the level services budget because it's the best offer on the table. but I actually want to be in a room where we map out the school system that we deserve, all of us, you too, and then we figure out how you go about paying for it. They do it differently in North Reading. They do it, and everybody says to me, "This isn't Brookline." I don't know what that even means. But North Reading, Westford, there are a lot of places to look at that are doing it differently, that are funding it at different levels. There are people who are executives and employees in every one of these corporations. There are town after town after town, whether it's Waltham or Wellesley or in the South Shore, that has a school foundation that's contributing to the money. Where are the ideas? Where is the vision? Where is the insistence, even if you're going to vote blue or purple, that you would say on the record what you think we need and your regret over the fact that we're not able to deliver it? I can't believe we're advocating and begging and arguing to maybe get the status quo. The status quo is not enough for our kids. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Harris. I live at 42 Mill Pond Road. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I've changed my mind. I'm speaking as a 24-year public educator, a mom, an aunt, and a resident in this town. I've had the opportunity to teach in districts that are very well funded and collaborate across all town departments for the success of all of our students. I've also worked in schools where resources are limited and the impact is real. In my classes today, we were talking about the importance of public education in our early republic and why did it matter so much to different people. With my son tonight, we were talking about why was this meeting important. And there's so many things we could say about that. And I think we all have our own reasons and we all value education. I want to speak on behalf of the young people in our schools who have the most complex needs and who are often being mentioned in terms of the cost to our schools. Young people in our district who have complex needs are already feeling like they're failing in so many parts of their day. And just like every kid in this school, they're giving their best effort to be successful. And then to have a town that has the money and the resources, should we choose to allocate them to our schools, to have their difficulties being presented in the conversation as if now they cost too much money. That's the piece that hurts me a lot about this conversation. And if all of those students were sitting here, which imagine they were, because it's about the young people in this district, what conversation would we want them hearing? Would we want them hearing that we don't have enough money to provide them what they need, when the fact is we do? And even if it's a sacrifice, aren't they important enough for that? So they're doing their best every day. As a teacher, I know it doesn't always seem that way because it's challenging to be a student and a teacher. But we all show up every day doing our best. And I think as a town, we need to do the same for our students, our hardworking teachers, and for our whole community. Thank you.
Hello, Nadia Chinchilla Martel at 64 White Birch Lane. I also wasn't going to make a comment, especially because the prior speakers have pretty much summed up my thoughts and feelings about all of this. But I was also thinking about my job, my daytime job, not the current job that I've taken on. In my job, I am a leader. If I want to make a decision that's going to impact a lot of people, I usually consult with experts. I review data. I review all the information that's available to me. Based on that information, I make a decision. I can go against the experts. I can go against the data. I can go against the obvious and make the bold decision not to listen to that and do the opposite. It's me. It's on me. If I am wrong, there are consequences for that. So my question to you is, if a year from now, if 2 years from now, it turns out you made the wrong call, because you didn't listen to the experts. You didn't listen to the teachers. You didn't listen to the parents. You didn't listen to the data. You didn't actually listen to, we spend less than most districts. We spend less than state levels. What is going to be the measure of success for you? Are you going to look at the test scores in a year and two and say, we were wrong, we made the wrong call. The math proficiency scores are low. The math proficiency scores, the reading proficiency scores, the MCAS scores are low. Our teachers are leaving. We can't retain the good teachers. Nobody will come to our district. Our classrooms are overcrowded. Are you, a year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, gonna recognize that you made a mistake? And if you did, how are you gonna hold yourself accountable? Are you gonna step down? Are you gonna resign? Are you going to sit here and say, I didn't do what was right for the kids, and therefore I didn't do my job, so I'm not adequately prepared to continue doing this job? Because there's a lot at stake. So I just want you to think about that. Are you prepared to take the gamble and go against the data, the recommendation of the experts, the parents, and the teachers? Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Jennifer Watson. I live at 30 Huckleberry Lane in North Andover. First of all, I'm a parent of 2 high school graduates and a sophomore in high school here in our town. I am a product of the North Andover school systems. And I want to first, Madam Chairperson, thank you and your team on behalf of many of the parents of the town. Everyone sitting up at that table right now has an incredible dedication to the children in our community. You're teaching our children, you're researching the best opportunities for curriculum improvements, innovative programs, you're studying best practices, budgets, and you're interacting with the rest of the town to make sure you really have a solid understanding of the problem and the problems that we're facing, and I sincerely thank you for that. I can even attest to the school committee represented at the graveyard shift of the high school SOS party when that member of the school committee didn't have a child in the school. So the dedication of you all to the town really needs to be noted, and I think it's worth saying that publicly. You have some very tough decisions in front of you. You are living under some very real fiscal constraints. We have a fixed tax levy capacity, and we have to do the best we can within that. And we only have so many chances to play a card for an override or increase the budget. And so it is your job to really wrestle with these, and we have entrusted you all to do that. And there's a lot of emotion in the room tonight and in the room over the past several meetings, and it's very understandable. Everyone turns into a mama bear when it comes to their children. But I urge you to take a step back and think about what steps need to be taken now to ensure that we can continue to have an outstanding, highly recognized school department, not just today, but in the future. And please don't make decisions now that put a Band-Aid on this and create a larger problem in the future. So I just ask you all to please factor that into your consideration as you make decisions. So thank you.
I'll keep my comments brief. My name is Ryan Dono. I live at 111 Woodcrest. I wanted to express my concerns that anything less than a level service budget is wholly inadequate. I'm deeply saddened that our town's leadership has decided to ponder that the best route forward is for school closures, staffing cuts, and an inadequate school budget. Our children deserve better. They deserve leaders that will find ways to improve, not worsen their schools. A school committee's job is to advocate that our kids get the best education possible and to ensure that our teachers and school systems are adequately supported. I thank you for all of the hard work that you've put into this. Your positions are not a position that I would like to be in, and I'm sorry that you're under a lot of pressure, and the pressure that you must be facing is truly daunting. But my children and all of our children and the teachers in our school district all deserve to have you advocating on their behalf on this decision, so thank you.
I just want to say one thing. The person who said 70
Sorry,
years
could
of...
you give us your name and address,
My name's
please?
Greg Penny, 102 South Bradford Street, okay? Write it down, thanks. Whoever said 70 years against 3 years of inconvenience should not be on the board. Embarrassing.
You hear that?
Actually.
Can you take it off with that?
I'm trying.
Sorry, there we go.
Thank you. Oh, my good Lord. Juliet Darman, 32 Clarendon Street in North Andover. I had to just take a picture of my computer because my computer was about ready to die. But all right, so at the last tri-board meeting, what I saw was a school committee who let down staff, parents, and children, who let us down. Because you have, since you have taken this role, constantly been asking others, whether it's the superintendent or overboards, whether this budget or this over budget would work or not. The major issue here is that none of those entities work directly in the schools or with students right now. And they have not done so for so long. I think you want to do what's best for the North Andover taxpayer. But to what end? New buildings all across North Andover with minimum staffing that will not be able to properly serve the residents? What we are facing is not unique to North Andover. It's across Massachusetts. And the audit pointed it clearly. It said, similar to other communities here in the Commonwealth, the costs to run a town and school are growing faster than in the past, whereas recurring revenue streams are simply not growing at the same rate. It's time to stop the Band-Aid for the current students and, more importantly, the future students. I thank you for your time. Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
All right, seeing no other comments, we'll go ahead and conclude the public comment section of the meeting. Thank you for all of those that provided your comments. We are going to move on to continued business, which is the superintendent's recommended FY26 budget.
So just again, here are the budget directives. We talked about them, but I've just listed them for you to see one more time. I'm not going to read them to all of you. If you want to go to the next slide. The next slide is a reminder of these are your budget options, or certainly you can talk about other things as well, but these are the budgets that we sent forth. There was a guidance budget. This was the guidance budget that was recommended to us of $64,858,914, and shows you what those cost centers would look like. We presented to you a level service budget that would be taking everything that we're doing currently this year, rolling it into next year, and that would be a 71.7, so just about $72 million budget. We shared with you I think what we're calling now the blue budget, or an alternative budget, that looked at a reduction of a budget that would be $67 million, $604,000. And then we also presented to you the purple budget, or another alternative budget, that came in a little over $69 million. This slide, again, just reiterates the different budgets and shares with you, again, some of the information that was shared at the tri-board meeting, that the guidance budget obviously is within guidance. The level service budget requires the use of 5 million levy capacity and 2 million override. The blue budget uses part of the levy capacity at 2.7 million, and the purple budget uses almost all of the levy.
Superintendent Lathrop, can I ask a question, or do you want us to hold?
No, go ahead.
I just have a question on below each of the budgets. It talks about different increases, the average single-family home per year. Is that an increase in taxes? I just want to be really clear on what is the increase in?
That is the increase in taxes to the families.
Okay, to families. Okay. Thank
Right?
you.
Am I correct? Yes.
Yeah, and that's on top of the regular increase that would happen anyway.
Okay.
Which would be roughly $250.
Microphone, yeah. So the slides that follow after this are really walking you through the level service budget, the blue budget, and the purple budget, and what it might look like if we had to, in each of the cost centers, if that was the budget moving forward. I'm happy to walk through those slides again. I don't know if it's easier for you to ask me questions.
I mean, I think we've seen those quite a bit. I think the committee can go ahead and ask questions.
You can use different slides for information if you need it.
I'll go first. Superintendent Lathrop, so as I think, and fellow committee, as I think about this, as we've been gathering all of the data from experts and pulling this together and working hard and continuing to work hard for what is best for our community and our students, it's what we do every day. One of the next questions is, what happens next year as we continue forward? So looking at any of these budgets, at this point, the one in blue or the one in purple, what happens next year? Have you had a chance, Superintendent Lathrop, to take a look at what level services would look like for either of those options?
Ms. Andrew, if you go to slide 14, I believe.
Oh, that's not a chart.
In here, though.
Oh, thank goodness.
Make that a little bit larger.
It's right
There
here.
we go. So what this chart looks at is, I will be honest, I did it based on the $69 million budget, and I did it based on the level service budget. And so this is if we were to, the level service budget at $71,784,000. If you roll that up to FY27, taking into consideration everything that we took into consideration this year, you're looking at needing a budget of $76,411,618, which would be a 6% increase. If you took the $69 million budget and you rolled that into FY27, that's almost $74 million, and that's a 7% increase in order to maintain both of those budgets as level services next year. And that would take into consideration expenses and salaries.
Which can I ask? Which we have a good handle on, right? Because the collective bargaining agreement with the teachers union extends to fiscal 27, right?
Yep, try slide 13. So this slide shows you what the COLAs and the cost of living and the step increases would be.
So this is what influenced the level services budget as you projected those out, at least part of what influenced it
Correct.
for the salary increases. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so looking at those numbers and thinking about what that would mean for next year. Could you go back just to that slide? I'm sorry, could you go? Yes. So it takes us to either, well, we've already talked, at least in the last meeting, level services would take it to 76. And then, I'm sorry, I'm trying to equate, so then the purple budget
The purple budget is
is
the
the
69 million, correct? And then
Okay.
that would go to, so if we were to roll that into FY27, you're looking for $73,802,000. 7% increase.
And if we thought blue, that would, that's $1 million, $2 million roughly difference.
Correct.
So we could ballpark that down. The level services would be, with Blue, 71 million-ish.
Ish.
Okay. I'm just trying to get, as we do this, what's sustainable and what drives us towards the right things for our schools. Obviously, looking at level service, this just highlights why all of us, I know I wasn't in the room, but I did speak and was watching, that level services just is not the choice that we're going to pursue. So now looking at purple and seeing those impacts into the out years, that seems drastic as well.
Any other comments?
So the risk, I think, is that if we, okay, I've been studying this all day. So the risk I see, right, is if we go for the purple budget. So first of all, if I may correct, I think tonight we actually can still recommend anything we want.
Oh, correct.
What we
Absolutely.
heard, right, what we heard from the finance
Absolutely.
committee is they would not support
Correct.
the level services
Correct.
budget.
We have not voted.
We've not voted. But the issue I'm concerned about is if we, for example, were to approve the purple or put forward the purple budget, which would use most of the levy capacity, leaving about $700,000 left, that projecting forward the purple budget to FY27 at 71 million, at 73 million, that there probably wouldn't be enough levy capacity left. There definitely wouldn't be enough levy capacity left to do that. So then we would, the only way to get there would be an override, if I understand
It'd be about
things
$2 million
right.
short.
Yeah, so we would be committing ourselves to seeking an override next year. Because it would be the only way, right? Short of, a windfall of some kind of revenue, right?
Somewhere between the purple and the blue, there's probably a magic number of about 68.5 that would
leave us capacity, right?
The danger in using up the levy capacity is that it goes away. So if I'm sorry, it's really hard for us to focus up here. We could actually hear all the things that you're saying. Yep, thank you. But I do not need to hear people saying what we're saying is stupid up here. I really appreciate if the public would be a little bit more respectful. You had your opportunity to make public comment. At this point, you're now watching a meeting in public. It's not a meeting with the public, and it's very different. Thank you very much for allowing us to do our job. We do take it very seriously. We are not shirking our responsibility. We do care about kids. My own children go to this school every single day, and they are going to be directly impacted by this. No. It's now my turn to make comment. I am.
Excuse me, we were very respectful during your comments, and we've always been very respectful during your comments. We just ask for the same respect.
No.
No?
We ask people to leave. Can we adjourn and ask people to leave?
Well, then please leave the meeting. Then please be
Going
respectful.
to allow us to have our meeting and not be interrupted. Thank you.
So my concern,
At 68.5.
Yep.
You use up about
Roughly half of it.
a little bit more than half.
Yeah.
That allows you the capacity to use some of that again next year. We know we need an additional 4 next year to make ends meet. A 2.5% or 3% increase from the town, which is what is projected, because we know, and not that could change, of course, but that based on the new growth that's coming in and all the numbers that we know at this point, doesn't quite get us there, where you need to have a little space. And the blue budget isn't very good either.
Right.
And that is the quandary that we are in. How do we decide to allow us to move forward and do the things that are good for our kids? I also want to keep us in the perspective that the $64 million guidance budget was a 4.5% increase, which in any other year would be a really good thing for this district. That is a huge amount. And even at the blue budget, we're doubling that to 8.9%. That is an enormous amount of money. Getting that amount of money allows you to do transformative things. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that we have other people in town and other people in leadership in town that is willing to help us out and support us in this endeavor. It would have been really easy for them to say no. You've gone over 2 years in a row. No. And instead, we went and we got what we asked for initially, which was to avoid the catastrophe of the red budget. And that was a good thing. And they're promising to get us more money. I think that's a really important thing. I think we have to acknowledge that and then ask for what is the right amount to allow us to continue to allow Ms. Lathrop and Ms. Ando and Ms. O'Neill and the rest of the team to do the really good work that they're capable of doing. And some of that's going to be making some hard decisions. I feel like sometimes the easy decision is to simply say level services and make everybody happy. It's harder to say, what do we need to trim right now? Because everything is really important. I've been in the experience of having to make those choices. I've been in the experience of being cut because of budget cuts and having to collect unemployment. I know what that's like for a teacher. I know what it's like to be in the classroom not too long ago. I know what it's like to be in schools every single day. That's not lost on me. And we have people who we need to also make sure we can sustain ourselves for more than 1 year.
Completely agree. I have a question, Superintendent. So I made myself a little chart, taking from last week, the last summary chart slide that showed you what the purple budget impacts would be, and wrote next to it, I wrote blue budget impacts to try to look at A and B. The question I have is, because it was a little unclear, in the purple budget, we hit the goal of the class sizes in the elementaries.
Correct.
But it wasn't clear if the blue budget was able to do that too.
The blue budget does not. The purple budget has every class size under 25, or 25 or under. The
Right.
blue budget has class sizes, there are at least 5 classrooms that have 27 students in their classroom.
Thank you.
Can you show the slide that has the different budgets and the, kind of where you have the highlight points of what's in or out? I forget which one. It's probably early on in the deck. Keep going down. There's one, it usually shows, because usually you've got it with the 4 and it kind of says, what are the cuts? It's just, okay, so this shows it by.
This shows it by cost center. There is
Okay.
one slide, right, I think maybe try slide 12, that shows you what the cuts would be at the 69 million.
That's the one I have here, Kelly, that I wrote next to in blue.
But, thank you. Because what I'm interested in seeing is what, not to create another color, but what could you do if we took the blue and let's say, I think, Joe, you were running, you listed off a series of numbers. Is it another, if we put another $1 million on the blue, you listed off a number that would allow us for next year level services and stay within.
68.5 gets us closer.
Okay, so what's.
About another $1 million on the blue.
So another $1 million on the blue, could you get class sizes to 25?
I think reasonably, yes. We can get class sizes to 25. I can always get class sizes to 25. It depends on what you're going to cut to get the class sizes to 25. Do you know what I mean? Right.
There's
So
other
if
trade-offs.
that's a directive, right, I can move the class sizes. The reason why the blue is at 67 is at that time the directive was we could go up to 27, so we did. But you're asking me if we were add another $1 million to the blue, could we produce class sizes of 25? Yes, we can.
And is that what you would want to do within say we're just in theory, at Blue, for that $1 million, would you think the best educational bang for the buck is going to class sizes 25, having the teacher leaders? Would that be the best move, or would you want time to figure that out?
I think a little bit of both, right? I think we'd want time if we are looking at a budget of, 68.5 million. I think we would need a little bit of time to see what that looks like. But that said, I think that from our conversations, from some of the things we've heard, some of the own work that each of you have done, that we have done, that it makes sense that we work very hard to keep our class sizes at 25. Now, you may have, if you have a class size at 25, you may have a student move in, you may bump up to 26. We also have opportunities to look if a student moves into the district. Do we then become a district that says you may not necessarily get to go to your home school when you move here mid-year? You may have to go to another school in the district that has a lower class size if we're trying to keep everything under 25. But ideally, yes, I'd like to start the school year with every class being 25 and under.
That would be doable with other cuts to non-student facing items with the
Right,
blue
so
amount of 67
the
plus.
current 69, the purple budget has them all at 25 or under. Obviously, if we're reducing that by some money, we'd have to go back and look at what other things we might need to reduce. So if you just go to any slide, like slide 4, for instance.
Summarized by now, Superintendent Gaithra.
So this shows the difference between blue and purple. So blue budget cut about 16 teachers, and that would be classroom teachers as well as specialists. Purple budget is somewhere between 10 and 13. And the reason there's a range is, as you know, not everybody, as you get a little bit more closer to where your target number is, it sort of depends on where the cuts may come from, to be honest. But we didn't cut 4 teaching assistants when we moved into purple. We may have to look at that. Now, that wouldn't be my first option because that's a student-facing position. So I might say in the high school, we were able to put back on slide 6, we were able to put back the 10% reduction to athletics. So maybe we would start to look at places like athletics and places that didn't have student-facing positions. But you know, I'm also going to be honest, and the reality is there are some positions there may also be some more student-facing positions to get to that piece.
And so it may be useful for the other committee members. So when you add up all the reductions for purple and blue and compare the two, in the blue case, it would be 34.5 fewer teachers total. And in the purple case, it's 23 to 29, depending on the range you just spoke about. So there's a difference. Sorry, if you total up in the purple case, it's a range of 23 to 29 overall.
23 to 29?
23 through 29, yeah.
Thank you.
And then the blue, it adds up, it was a little more definitive, it adds up to 34.5. So it's somewhere between 5 and 11 is the range that if we go down to blue, or the fewer teachers we'll have if we go to blue. If we go in between there, it's a little somewhere in the middle, right? 2 to 7 or something like that. Am I reading that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
It's about right. But you have to remember too, when you get to doing the cuts, then you're going to start looking at collective bargaining agreements where people are in terms of, you know, when they were hired. Obviously, someone who's newer in their career is probably making a little less money than somebody who has been here a little bit longer. So
That's why part of the
that's
reason.
why there's a range.
Right. And we could certainly look at incentives like we did last year, right? If we wanted to.
I don't know that that's an option. I'm going to be honest with you. I think that if you want to entertain looking at the incentive, that money came from somewhere else, and you've already taken that money and added, that came from the reserve for the middle school teachers, and you've already taken that reserve money and put it into the budget. So that would be a different kind of situation.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for reminding me of that.
So if I'm looking at, if my back of the napkin math is correct too, so if we did with the blue budget, the 67.6, added $1 million onto there, that's a 10% increase from this year's budget, roughly. It's 10%. Like, that's a huge increase, at least in terms of budget year over year. It's 10%. I mean, that is significant.
And to be fair, yes. And to be fair, Ms. Cormier, it's less than that because we are over our allocated amount this year by
Actuals versus, but yeah.
our actual. It's not that much of an increase, and that's where the problem there is.
But the actuals were something we didn't have control over. They were already set
Absolutely.
before we were able to
Absolutely.
take any cuts to that or look at it in a way that would be better for our students.
100% certain.
Ms. Lathrop, I had a question because as we talk about, we go into the levy, we have a tax increase. As we increase the budget, of course, it increases all the taxes. And as Mr. Brown had stated, there could leave with the possibility of voting for an override next year, but we also have to think about the debt exclusion for Kittredge. So if we weren't able to get the debt exclusion, what does that look like for North Andover Public Schools if we did not get Kittredge?
If we did not get Kittredge, we then would need to look at what types of renovations if we would be doing to the current schools and district in order to meet the needs of our students. I think that we have an opportunity to have a state-of-the-art school. We have an opportunity to build a school that is going to be the home to approximately 320, I think 340 students, to have everything that we've wanted to have in a school, to have the space for our students. Our educators have done a wonderful job meeting diligently with the Massachusetts School Building Authority and really mapping out a school building that meets the needs of the current learners. So by not having that, we are not having an opportunity to have a wonderful facility for our students in North Andover.
Can I say, it's even worse, right? Because if we're honest with ourselves, the state of, with the exception of Thompson, the state of our elementary school's physical plant is very bad. And we're doing a wonderful job with great people we have to try to get around that, but it's there and it's not going to get better, right?
We have older schools.
Yes, that's a better way to say it.
I still call the sergeant new, but that was a long time ago new.
You're right. Okay, you're right. I guess I was referring really to Franklin and Kittredge, just very old buildings. Franklin's not, as I understand, it's not even ADA compliant, right? Neither is Kittredge. So we have a very unique. We have to push really hard to get Kittredge debt exclusion to pass because North Andover needs new facilities.
Yeah, and that's exactly my concern. If we are not looking in the long term of what our students need and looking in the short term, we could jeopardize a long-term plan.
Exactly. I've been thinking about that all day between the purple and the blue.
Yeah.
That exact thought.
I was thinking the same thing, Mr. Brown, and leaning more towards blue this morning for that reason. We know the reason why there is excess levy capacity is partly because of the way we structured our relationship with Amazon and to not have their tax burden placed on the residents of the town. And the benefit of that was not just about lower taxes, but it allows us to go for a debt exclusion next year, and when we thought we were going to when we thought we wanted to do it, and to be able to pay for that with that excess levy capacity. Because that loan cost about $2 to $3 million a year. And that's what the plan was for the past several years. And if we're going to change that and use levy capacity now, it's going to make the debt exclusion more expensive. I think that's a great idea to still do it, but that is the trade-off. We've heard a lot of people tell us they don't understand why there's excess levy capacity or why that was the plan and we're not doing the things we should. It was a plan. The town manager did a lot of diligent thinking in putting that together about how we can do these building projects over time and make it affordable. And if we choose to go blue or purple or anything above red, we are throwing a wrench in those plans and we'll have to rethink them. It's a thing that probably should happen, but it is like one of the impacts to think about, that Kittredge does get more expensive.
Of course, the corollary to that, I guess, is that if we don't push for Kittredge, we lose the opportunity to get the state to help us in a very significant way.
40%.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
As I understand it, we actually went to the state and said, we have a number of buildings that need work. Which one are you most likely to fund? And they picked Kittredge, not us.
That's correct.
So it would be unwise, I would have thought, to just sort of ignore it. And I mean, I guess that's the argument for having leaving some of the excess capacity with the understanding with the other boards that we were going to use that in order to pay to close the $4 million gap to get to next year. I think it would be so we wouldn't need an override next year for an operating budget. That would be really difficult, have an override for the operating budget and ask for the Kittredge at the same time.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had a lot of comments of we need to think about the long-term plan. We need to think about the long-term plan. And if we're thinking about the long-term plan, we have to be fiscally responsible for our students to be able to have a long-term plan and not continually being in a position where we're scraping the bottom of the bucket.
And in one of those things, one of the things that we don't have control over, but we have to consider, especially in kind of using our experts, there are things happening at the federal level that could very likely impact our education dollars. I asked our congressman, I said, what should we be doing at the local level? First, obviously, is making sure we're doing the right things by all of our students, but then also mentioning, this is the time to buckle down. This is the time to pull in parent volunteers. He mentioned salary cuts, right? Like, these are the types of things, like, given the impact that could be happening at the federal level when it comes to our education dollars, we need to make sure that we're spending our money wisely now so we're prepared for what could happen, because we don't know.
I asked what the figure is. It's $3.4 million a year.
Yeah, between Title I and IDA,
And lunch.
and lunch. It's
That's our share, if you will, if that's our federal dollars.
Our federal dollars are about $3.4 million a year.
And we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. I mean, all of us can watch the news and it changes daily. But now is the time to make sure we can sustain ourselves and our students.
Not all of that 3.4 is in our current operating budget. The food services is separate and not included, and the Title I is separate as well.
Correct.
The special ed, I think it's like 1.7 or something like that, I think is included in our operating budget.
That's technically true,
Yeah.
but those are still things we're going to want to do.
Absolutely.
So in a way, it's true, but it doesn't matter.
Absolutely, sir.
As a parent of students in North Andover Public Schools, one of the things I focus on for my students in general, or for my kids in general, is stability. And my concern is if we go to something that's not sustainable, we are not giving our students stability. We're constantly having to readjust, make shifts, and that's not fair to them. It's not fair to them to have to do it year after year after year. Not fiscally responsible.
I think right now we have more transparency than, I've been on the school committee for a year, so obviously more than in this year, but I've been paying attention as a parent for probably the past 10 years, and this is more transparency towards the numbers I've seen any school committee or superintendent put out for our schools. I think we now have this opportunity with the transparency that Superintendent Lathrop has put into the system and will continue to do with her team to operate the schools on budget, searching for that, in reaching that academic excellence. We need to give Superintendent Lathrop the opportunity to do that in a sustainable manner. And that's what making these hard choices, they aren't easy, with a budget will get us there.
Is it, if I could ask the superintendent another question. So the number, the third line down, right, the plus 2.746 million in the blue case, and the plus 4.315 in the purple case. In effect, that is the levy capacity that we would need to tap, right? So if we were to go somewhere in the middle, and I also understand from town manager, right, that we have approximately $5 million of capacity.
Correct.
So if we go to, say, plus 3, we would still have 2 left.
Correct.
The thing that I'm trying to do the math in my head is, does that work? I'm trying to figure out, would that work next year to avoid us needing an override? That's really the question.
So I think I can help. I asked the town manager that question today, and her answer was $2 million.
So a little bit less than the blue.
So that, right. Although I think that it's possible to leave a little less than 2 million because.
Oh, you mean leave 2 million? Sorry, I just want to make sure. She wants us to
So
leave 2 million or use 2
if
million?
you ask the town manager,
Right.
how much levy capacity should you leave so you do not need an override to do a level service budget
Next
from
year.
where we are in 26 into 27, her answer is 2 million.
We need to leave 2 million.
We need to leave 2 million.
Okay, so we could
I
use-
think it's possible to leave a little bit less on the understanding that we wouldn't go for an override next year, but we might need to make some additional cuts. I mean, this has all happened so quickly that, you have a superintendent who hasn't been able to get a full-time budget director, although she has an excellent consultant working on it. Enrollment is more likely to fall than not in the year, and it's possible that we would see some opportunities. That's not the right word, but I think we could leave a little less than 2 million, but not much.
But leaving 700,000, you're saying would be?
That would be not even close to 2 million.
You're right. So, I don't know, I would be ready to make a motion. If people feel we need to continue to discuss, we can, but.
I have another question.
Okay.
If we, as they've kind of thrown out, did something between a blue and a purple, are we able to reach the educational goals of the district for our students?
It's a good question. Yes, we're able to reach our educational goals because we're setting our educational goals for our students, right? So we will be determining what we want to see, how we want to see our students to succeed. Every one of these budgets will bring some cuts, will bring something that we have to cut and take away from. But it also allows us to continue the work that we have started to do, and it continues to allow us to provide high-quality instructional materials. It continues to allow us to provide appropriate professional development. It continues to allow us to set attainable goals and work towards those goals. It's hard to project. I can put on paper what we're probably going to have to cut in order to get to that funding. Then when you start to get in and you make those cuts and you make some readjustments, I mean, to be honest with you, these are our projected cuts, but probably there will be a time when I might say, we weren't able to cut that. I'm just pretending this, right? We weren't able to cut the counselor that we had projected on here that we were going to cut. We did something else instead because that counselor was needed to meet the needs of X students in X place, and that's why we had them here. Somewhere between blue and purple allows us to continue to move forward in the work that we're doing, and allows us to continue to provide for our students. Yes, there are going to be things that aren't here, and there are going to be less electives at the high school, but we are looking very carefully at some of the electives that our students aren't, and not to say that they don't love them, right? If there's an elective that has 8 students in it, those 8 students probably really love that course, and that's probably a really something fantastic, and we've been really fortunate to be able to provide that for our students. But when we're making a hard decision, that may not be the one that we're able to sustain because there's 8 students in that class and you have a full-time teacher sort of in that role. But I do feel confident in the work that we've set forward and the goals that we've set forward as a leadership team and in our ability to be able to move forward and accomplish those goals. I think to someone's point, one of the in public comment, we have much work to do as a district. The district does need to come together and create a very sustainable strategic plan for moving forward. I need to have time to be able to evaluate how we're spending the money and if the things that we're doing are really making the benefits that we want to see for our students. That takes time. That takes investigating, watching, looking at the data. We came and presented to you our MCAS data this year, and we were very honest in saying it's not where we believe we can and should be. That we have goals that we want to achieve. I believe that any budget that you give us, we're going to work within. I don't think that we could continue those goals with the guidance budget, and we've talked about that. I do believe, and I put this in my executive summary, that between blue and purple, we can move forward, continue to make goals for our district, continue the work that we're doing at the high school in terms of the portrait of a learner. I think we need more community engagement. We need to hear from our families about the things that they value and the things that they want to see in their schools, and the opportunity for us to be able to do some of the things that we talked about the STEM teacher. Some reorganization. Sometimes you continue to move things along, and maybe the things that we're moving along aren't meeting the needs of our students. And this gives us an opportunity to say, well, you know what, that's not meeting the needs of our students, but a STEM class may meet the needs of our students. And you can do some of that switching. It's a long-winded answer to your question, and that I can't predict the future, but I can say that I have a very strong administrative team, that we've set very high standards for ourselves, that we have administrative goals. I think this is the first year that the school committee's been presented with a district improvement plan, as well as school improvement plans, as well as superintendent goals. And, I would encourage all of us, but all of our community, become invested in those things. You need to know, the community, I believe, needs to know the district improvement plan. The community needs to know the school improvement plan. They need to know what the superintendent goals are, and those are the things that are going to continue to move us forward in being invested in those pieces.
Could I just add something to that? We've heard lots of comments about North Andover underspends on schools, and I've checked this out by looking at the ratio of our spending to our foundation budget, and compared it. And I've looked at all of the towns on the manager's comparative town list, and with one exception, we spend considerably less. So there's no question in my mind that there are things that we need to do that we aren't doing, and I think what the superintendent said is really important. It isn't just class size. She's inherited a position. We've been in sort of constant emergency mode. At some point, we do need to go to the town, and we do need to say, here's what we need to build a really excellent school system. But we need to figure out what that is, and it isn't just reducing class sizes. And so I think we need a couple of years to continue the good work that's been started, and then have in the back of our mind that, yes, we need to be understanding what it would take to have a really excellent system, and then to be able to make the case to the town, to give ourselves several months so that we don't just come to an override vote at the last minute, but we've given considerable thought to it.
I know, and Ms. Sando, this may be more directed to you, towards you, and Ms. Lathrop, you can jump in as well, because I know we've had these discussions in meetings in the past about where do we see North Andover as far as educational goals, and the comments come up, who do we compare ourselves with? But the ultimate goal is to stand out, right? And I think you've mentioned that, to be the example of something that hasn't been done, that's better for students.
I think so, and that I think we have had some opportunities where is it close enough? No. For example, we've shared with you about our Weight and Wisdom rollout, where other school systems have come to see what our teacher leaders have done in order to move that work forward. And it's unique, and it's very amazing, and we have incredible teacher leaders that we were able to fund with HQIM grant funding. But this idea that we have to figure that out, but in following the best advice we can, we know high quality instructional materials are good for kids, and we found our very unique ways in North Andover to use our own staff and teachers in order to move things forward. But I do think we're blazing some of those trails as well.
One of the things that I do like about sorry, shifting topics, but one of the things I do like about more about the purple budget is it notably avoids cuts to special education. And I know the cut down to the blue budget was not a huge amount, but I do worry about our kids who have an IEP or a 504 or have some needs to be addressed. And I also worry if with the blue budget, that 5 to 11 teacher difference. I worry about our ability to do tier 2 interventions with kids and to make sure that we can get kids the support they need so that they, when appropriate, they don't necessarily end up with an IEP or needing additional services, because there's that space in between the two that we want to make sure kids are being supported as well. And I think that's really important that we maintain those level of services. I lean more towards purple right now. I was feeling different before, but some of those key points that are standing out are mattering to me. And maybe if we declare that we do need an override now for next year, that could be okay. It does make it hard with the debt exclusion request as well. Although I feel more confident in the town's ability to go for a debt exclusion for a new school building than necessarily an override. Temporary versus permanent.
Any other comments? And I just wanted to say, I mean, several of us have students in school, have students who have graduated from the North Andover Public Schools. We have students that are on IEPs. We have students that are on 504, just among the committee here. So we definitely are taking into consideration students. We do care about them. Ours are included, and it's our job to look out for not only ours, all of them. So to ever say we don't care about students or we don't care about education, that's why we're here. And it does affect us all.
Class size. Do you have it for the?
I didn't put it on there because.
Oh, and it didn't include the middle schools, though, did it?
No.
High school.
No. We had that on a previous budget. Do you have a question?
No, we do have it here. Never mind.
Oh, on the summary.
It's on page 12, slide 12.
We know the exact number between the blue and the purple budget that will keep us from having to will allow us to do level services next year without doing the override. Was it a mil? Do you know the exact number?
Well, didn't Mr. Musk?
He may have said it.
Yeah, he did.
What was
according to the town manager, we need to leave $2 million
So what's that?
of levy capacity to avoid an override next year. That was what you said, right?
Yeah.
So where does that put us?
Numbers.
There's $5 million in levy
Available.
In levy available means additional taxes for all of us to pay.
Yes.
So that puts it. I'm just trying to figure out what the budget would, what our budget number.
Do
would
we
be.
recall what the town manager's recommended increase? I know she had it planned out, increase for next year.
3.04 or 3.14?
So just to answer Mr. Brown's
Oh, you mean percent?
question, if
Yeah.
the blue budget is 67.6, leaves 2.4 million.
That leaves 2.4 in the.
So if you had a $68 million budget, it would leave 2 million. If you had 1 million over the blue budget, you'd get 68.6, and you'd leave 1.4. Mr. Hicks said 68.5, and you'd leave 1.5. So I would say it's somewhere between 68 and 68.6.
At this point, I think, given that all the discussions that we've had over the past months, the discussions tonight, really, I think where I'm leaning towards supporting is between the blue and the purple at 68.6. That million more and obviously all of these budgets, Superintendent Lathrop, you'll use your judgment and your team's judgment as to exactly what that looks like. All of the things that you're doing are illustrative scenarios that we can see what the potential cut would be, but all of that will be, you will decide as your team what's best. But I'm leaning towards 68.6 between.
The only problem I have with that, it's not coming, I'm more or less the same, but the worry I have is that at 1.4, I'm worried that we'll be forced to an override. That's all.
I'm pushing it a little bit, hoping we can find something somewhere.
I would push it. If we're going to have to do it, let's do it and go with purple.
Because I think if we push it, we'll not have to do
I'm
it.
sorry, say that again, Mr. Hicks.
Ms. Cormier said she's pushing a little bit by having it be 1.4 remaining levy capacity, and I'm gonna go with if we're gonna have to do it, let's do it.
Then I'd go back to 68, to be honest.
I'm just thinking, if we, in theory, if we went for level services, we would have to do an override this year. That's the difference, right? That's
Right, and the only ones who we've seen that support from other town departments, and
not there.
It's not. I'm not capitulating to them, but it's a recognize that a divided meeting between the boards would not fare well. And also, the select board is the only one who could put that on the ballot. And as we saw in Andover last year, tried to get forced, and it didn't work. So, yes, we have to advocate and fight, and we have to be aware of the parameters that we exist in.
And the implications to next year and to Kittredge, the debt override, right? Like that's the...
That worries me greatly.
Yeah, it's the longer
being
term,
able to
right?
get the override and a debt exclusion.
You can't just think about today.
In 1 year.
Well, we have to make a decision, folks, right? So, if I may, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a proposal or make a motion. Is this okay?
Absolutely.
All right, so I would like to propose that we give the superintendent a budget of 68.2, leave us 1.8 of capacity. So I'm proposing that we give a budget of $68.2 million.
Seconded.
Any other discussion?
I'm not going to support that.
Want to make an amendment?
No. Well, I mean, we can either discuss and vote, and I vote no, or I can make an amendment, and the amendment doesn't pass. And
It might pass, you don't know till you make it.
I was going to make a motion for the purple. I think that makes next year challenging, but I think it gives us an opportunity to advocate for what we think we need. I think we can get support from townspeople. I think as much as I know not just from other town boards this year, I know there's not support in the community right now for an override. I talked to a lot of people and I listened to others, and I know that that is a battle that we would be foolish for us to engage in and waste the opportunity. I think we would stand a good chance for it for next year, and I think that would be a worthy fight, one that we could take on. So I'm okay putting us a little bit in that position. And if that doesn't work, then we have to either we make the cuts this year, those 5 to 11 positions, or we're going to have to make them next year, those 5 to 11 positions.
Do we recall if we were to do the purple budget and then have to get an override next year and a debt exclusion, what is the tax increase that we're looking at? Just thinking about the probability of getting this through.
I think
Override, it's about $100 per million.
Here, wasn't it?
It's about $100 per million on the average, on our standard
Purple would take this year to an additional 407 for the average single family.
Right.
Right, plus whatever else our taxes were going to go up.
It's an additional 100 or so.
About what you said it was.
And how much of a debt exclusion were we going to need?
I don't know the exact number. I remember that it was, it does get more expensive because we don't have the levy capacity built. We no longer have the built-in levy capacity to do that. But whatever budget we choose that's not red is going to take away that opportunity anyway. So again, I think it's a worthy fight.
Well, what's relevant is that if you remember a number, it was from a time when 2/3 of it was going to come out of the levy capacity.
Yep.
And so under any of these scenarios, none of it will. So the increase to pay for the debt service on our share of the Kittredge is going to be sizable.
Regardless if we go with blue or purple.
I think there might be another danger, though, which is if we use that much of the levy capacity, are we in trouble with our COLAs and all of that the following year? In other words, do we make the debt exclusion even larger? Right. If we take away all the levy capacity, then there's no other way to raise. I guess it's saying the same thing over again, right? You still need to have an override.
But at that point, and that means we would have to cut some positions, sadly. But that's just the same thing we would be doing now. At least it gives us an opportunity to, as Mr. Moskowitz has said in previous meetings, doing it within 2 to 3 months is a quixotic, I think would be the right word, endeavor. But maybe in a year we would have some success. Is it Don Quixote, the one with the yeah, I think
no,
so.
that is what I said. I guess the problem is, could we go for a large override with other, not just schools, but other things, and get the Kittredge exclusion? Maybe not. So maybe if you're thinking about all the things that need to happen, maybe you want to do the Kittredge exclusion next year, and then the year after that, go for a, sort of to make the larger changes that we'd like to make.
So I think what Joe is saying is basically we'd be delaying some of the cuts a year.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also think a debt exclusion for the Kittredge is a very specific thing, and we've seen some really good support in the town for school buildings the last couple times we've asked for it. I think overrides are more likely when it's not about one part of town or one part of the town of the one department, but it's about what's best for the entire town. I think people would be more likely to be in favor of that if it helped impact fire, police, senior services. It seems that I think that would be a better coalition to build and a better fight to win, a better opportunity to win the fight.
Also keeping in mind, if we were to push forward the purple, there's no guarantee the select board or FinCom would recommend it. But that would be it. That's their choice.
Kind of keeping in mind what's going to, I'm still keen off of what funding we could lose, that we're completely out of control. We're at the mercy of the federal government in terms of some of that funding, right? We've got to, it seems like now is the time. I mean, a $68.2 million gives us, I don't know, maybe a little less than 10, maybe 9.5 more than we budgeted this year. That's a large increase. Will allow us to do tremendous, Superintendent Lathrop to do tremendous work with the students. We get the economies of scale of closing Kittredge. We know our enrollment is down 400 students. Kind of right-size some of those ratios, and then be able to move forward next year. And I think have our best chance of getting the Kittredge debt exclusion, because that's key too. We can't lose that. We can't lose public support for that. And I kind of think about, making sure we have that public support. We think back to, the middle school fields. I'll be honest, I thought that was going to go by easy, right? You think about all of us wanting that for our children to have those fields, and then the fact that we didn't get it.
And
what is
we'll
this
be
gonna
paying
look
for
like?
that for a long time.
For a long time. Like, what is this going to look like? We have to make sure that we're showing, and I think now Superintendent Lathrop is showing how are we using the money that we're getting, that we're using it responsibly, and that we're improving the services for our kids. And I think we need to do that in measured steps. And I think a 10% increase is a large measured step. Go ahead and vote.
I think that when we talked about doing a midway, adding a 1 point, whatever David proposed, 1 point,
Well, it's adding.
68.2.
16.2.
Thank you. And keeping class sizes down to 25, we're looking at the class sizes of the purple budget, which would distribute Kittredge kids to 3 of the elementary schools.
Correct. Franklin, Sargent, and Atkinson.
You could do that with 68.2.
That's what we would plan to do.
I guess I propose that not because I love it. No, everybody knows that. I don't love it. I mean, I would love to do the 71, but I just don't think it's practical. I take heart in the superintendent's analysis and the executive summary she shared with us. She can make it work. It just seems to be our most successful path forward for all those reasons. If I didn't have that confidence from you, I wouldn't be in support of it. And I know it's a challenge, but I'm confident you can do it. And that's where I'm at.
And you're referencing the 68.2?
Yes.
It's the motion on the table.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that that's. All right, are we ready to take a vote?
I mean, I'm gonna, how I'm gonna vote. I mean, I could propose an amendment to go to the full 60 purple, but if I get outvoted on this one, then that would be the next motion I would make. I don't know if it makes a difference mechanically.
So, I mean, another concern I have is, we've cut our budget very close to the point where it's been very hard to stay within a budget. And any foreseeables will throw us out of it.
Yes.
And then we're going back to the town and asking for assistance again.
Yes.
A good question, but are you giving yourself reserve, what the reserves, Superintendent Latham? I mean, you can't account for everything.
I
Who
think
knows
the
what's gonna
difference
happen,
is if
but-
whatever the budget number is, I'm going to make the appropriate adjustments in order to live within those means. So it's not, if it's $68 million, we're going to make now that we know what it costs, what we're spending on all the things that we are either salaries or expenses in our district, we would make those cuts or those, adjustments to those, and then we would live within those means, but it would mean living with less. So what happened this year was that we didn't make enough cuts. Not that I wanted to make those cuts, but there weren't enough cuts in order to meet the budget that was passed last year, which is why we're projecting a $3.5 million overage.
Can I ask a question of and I was thinking along these lines before, so this is more for, I guess, Mr. Brown and Ms. Cormier. Are you worried, because purple this year would not necessitate a override, but purple next year, but carrying that forward 1 year probably would. And that is the fear.
Exactly.
I think that's a reality.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
it's also
It's not a fear.
and it's endangering
Okay.
Kittredge.
That is
Kittredge as
your
well.
hesitation.
Yeah, it's
Right.
because it's not just, it's not, and we're all thinking this way, right? It's not just this year, it's next year too. So
Yep.
trying to
Can you go
connect.
closer to the microphone?
And I know we're all thinking about that, so I'm not trying to imply that
Yeah.
you're not. But it's those two together.
Right, and I guess what weighs on me, Joe, a lot is the, the opportunity to get the state to help us in such a big way. I'm really worried about losing that, because that's not easily recovered. Then if we ultimately, and we will ultimately need a new facility, the town will have to absorb the entire burden of that, making it much worse 5 years from now, or whenever we finally say we can't repair Franklin anymore, or we can't repair Kittredge anymore.
And I know, I think I've said this 5 times already tonight, but also the factors we can't control, right? And hearing from when our congressman, now is the time for parent volunteers to step up and, slashing of salary. Like this is, we need this groundswell of support, no matter what our budget is. If they're talking about leaning in and having parents help, in whatever form that is, who knows, right? We'll have to wait and see what actually happens. But there are other things we can't control that we need to make sure that we're spending our money wisely. And that's part of my.
I guess I'm just also wondering, we might recommend purple now, but it does go before to select board and to FinCom, and there might be some difference of opinion at that point. That might be okay for us to push them. I don't want to hang them out to dry, but because they have agreed to get rid of the red one, and we got that successfully happen very quickly, and we all determined that that was a bad idea. But now it's also I think Chris Allen last week said it, it's like they didn't want to give us more guidance than showing us that level services was bad, because the number that we now propose is our number. And we should think about what educationally could be best for our kids. And part of me is like, you're right, we should not be stupid in asking for something that's unsustainable. But maybe we should be a little risky.
I guess I think the 10% is. I think we are asking a lot, which is good. We should be, right? And then it's 10% this year, and then level services or more next year, as we kind of figure out, did this work? Did this not work? What do we need to do? Right? Because we need to get back to that and more. So.
And just thinking about this from almost like a negotiation perspective, if we were to push forward 69, it gives them room to, if they had to come back to 68.2, they could. If we're pushing forward 68.2, they may come back to 67. So do we put our best foot forward and say, look, this is what we need, and if they recommend less, we have a little more wiggle room there. You understand what I'm saying?
The number that ends up on the warrant is the number that FinCom puts there.
But I think part of this is we have to recommend the budget that we think is the right one for all of the reasons that we have to consider. So I think putting forward the budget that we think is the right one is what we need to do.
And I'm going to hold firm at purple. Not sorry. And you're going to hold firm at the other one as well. And that's what we do.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and take a vote. Mr. Hicks?
I'm just trying to make sure I remember the motion. We
The
have
motion
not
was
changed
for
it. It was Dave's
68.2.
original.
68.2.
68.2.
Okay, Mr. Brown?
Yes.
I'm doing it the wrong order. Mr. Moskowitz, sorry.
Yes.
Ms. Cormier?
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes. So we'll push forward 68.2 million.
Can I say something? I feel a lot of what you're saying, respectfully, Mr. Hicks, I really do. I just, everything I said before, I just can't bring myself to do it.
It's okay, Mr. Brown. I have voted no on budgets before.
Yeah, no, and I guess, when we just,
That's why we vote.
For me, thinking about the long-term plan, and again, like I said, having long-term stability and not finding us in the same position where we're having to move our kids around and adjust cuts and doing it all over again, that I just can't see doing that. But that's where we're at. We're going to push forward the 68.2 million. Come to the microphone. I'll allow one question.
One question, right? Oh, yes. Natalia Davila, Main Street, North Andover. So if you are proposing a budget that's not up there, then how do we know what direction we're going in with losing teachers, where our kids are going from Kittredge, things like that? I think that's a little confusing.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that question. And I think the answer to that is when we push a budget forward, and as Ms. Lathrop has said, it's going to be up to her to make sure we're living within those means of how that's going to work. So it's going to be up to her to work that out. We're telling her, we're approving to push forward 68.2. We don't know if Select Board and FinCom will be on the same page as us, but it's going to be up to her to make the determination of how we live within that budget.
We have a meeting next week. Would it be an impossible task, Ms. Lathrop? You can say yes, it would be impossible to make some adjustments to the cost centers.
Can I just make one comment?
That might be an inappropriate ask.
My concern is she's evaluating this. I want her to be able to have the flexibility to say, these are some of the changes that we need to make, and not having to say, this is exactly it, and this is what we have to stick with.
At some point, we do need to vote on the cost center.
We can give you a $68.2 million budget that shows you the cost centers, right? So we pushed forward these 4 budgets. We can reduce it to 68.2 to see that. I think I would be leery about adding more of these charts to show, because I think that's the change. I think what would be helpful for myself and the administrative team is if there are certain directives from the school committee. So if in a $68.2 million budget, is the directive to keep class sizes 25 and below? Is the directive to, I would assume, make additional cuts to as many non-student facing positions as possible?
Very similar to the directives we've given, and our recommendation was to stay under 25.
Great.
Would it be fair to say that at some point we would have to do that you would present a more detailed budget and we would debate it? And how much time do you need?
Did you what?
Well, I think we should give you enough time to do it thoughtfully.
Yeah, I think that that's going to be our work now moving forward, right? We still have to go to town meeting, and the budget will be approved eventually at town meeting, but we will go to work. We obviously have already been doing some of that work in terms of looking at all of these budgets to see where positions would have to be eliminated, and we want to be respectful to those folks who may not have a position in North Andover next year, so that they have an opportunity to start to look for employment. And we will work very closely with NADA to be able to do that. I think I answered before in that this does close Kittredge School, and we would look to move our Kittredge students to Franklin, Atkinson, and Sargent. And we would start to develop that, work with the Kittredge community and those schools in order to make that transition plan.
I think it's important to understand, too, even though we're recommending 68.2, we still don't have a set budget until it is voted on at town meeting. So that is fluid.
Yep. In rethinking a little bit about your cost centers, I would like to advocate for the special education budget to not be reduced.
And actually, I almost proposed it that way, but I didn't want to tie your hands when you're coming up with, because there may be some logic behind, maybe there's a tiny reduction there or whatever. I didn't want to make it that rigid, but that was in my mentality. That's part of the reason I picked the number I did.
And I think that's how we got to purple, right? So we listened to lots of what we heard from the community, and really trying to keep those services for our students. So we will continue to do that work.
And I just, one thought that it is no guarantee that town meeting will in fact vote for 68.2. We kind of assume that it'll be a little easier because we're pretty sure that we'll have support from the other two boards, but a friend of mine who hangs out in the senior center, sort of in honor of me, I guess, said to them, well, what do you guys think about voting, a big increase in taxes? And she was told without any ambiguity, none of them were in favor of it. So, it's going to be work to get enough people at town meeting ready to vote for what's still going to be a much higher, at least twice, maybe a little more than twice the average increase in taxes. And we shouldn't just assume that it's a done deal.
So meaning if we don't get the votes to increase the levy,
Well, to use the levy capacity.
to use the levy capacity.
What happens?
Town meeting will require.
That we need
Excuse me,
at
even if the
68.2.
FinCom recommends it, somebody, some low taxer can come in and propose an amendment. Sorry, Joe.
They could, but the ask at town meeting would be a simple majority vote on the budget as recommended by FinCom
Okay.
and Select
Yeah,
Board
right,
and us.
right.
Right, this budget would not require anything special other than the normal vote on the budget.
People
Vote on the
will
budget.
talk about how it's increasing their taxes.
Oh,
If,
sure.
if,
Yeah.
if the FinCom recommends it, if the FinCom doesn't recommend it, then we have the right, which I assume we would exercise, to propose an amendment, and if we carry it, we carry it.
All right. Do I have,
I move to adjourn?
Second.
all right, Mr. Brown, or Mr. Hicks,
Yes.
Mr. Moskovich?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Cormier?
Yes.
And I vote yes, we are adjourned.